In this video and the next, we're going to look at two specific types of neuron, both of which merit our attention. And in both cases, the entire preceding discussion about functions should be kept carefully in mind. The degree to which functions are appealed to in identifying something, and the degree to which neurons can support a functional explanation. These are crucial topics in order to understand how we interpret individual aspects of the nervous system. This video is going to be primarily about mirror neurons, which are by far the more famous of the two kinds of neurons. These were discovered in the 1990s, and they became a topic of great discussion in the late 1990s. That has abated somewhat, but there was about 15 years of intense discussion about mirror neurons. As you can see, Google Scholar has plenty of results there. And the origin of these comes from a now mythical, a story from a research lab that has acquired mythical status. The lab was in Parma in Italy, where Giacomo Rizzolatti and colleagues were working on rhesus macaque monkeys doing single unit recordings from individual neurons. The part of the brain that they were interested in is known as the ventral premotor cortex. It's understood by these scientists to be a motor region. That's the ascription of function, pay attention. They understood this to be a motor region. That is, they expect things that they record in this part of the brain to be interpretable in terms of specific defined functions, specifically motor functions, the control of the body in action. The story that kicked all this off has been retold so often I have no idea what's true and what's false. I like to imagine a dark laboratory in the middle of the night, and the postdoc has come in to take care of the monkeys, maybe forgot something in the lab. And there's a monkey there who has a unit, electrode recording from a single unit in ventral premotor cortex, known to be a motor region. And in fact, this specific neuron became very active when the monkey did a goal-directed action like picking up a peanut. And what happened was, the postdoc saw a peanut in front of the monkey and went to pick it up, him or herself, and found that the neuron would fire strongly when they did the action rather than the monkey doing the action. In such laboratory situations, very often the neurons are attached via various electrical means to a device that emits a small sound when the neuron is active. So you can imagine this as the postdoc goes to pick up the peanut, and suddenly this sound alerts them to the fact that this neuron is particularly active. What was interesting here was that the neuron was presumed to be a motor neuron, and here the monkey is not actually doing anything. The action is the same as if the monkey did it, but it's now being done by somebody else, revealing a tangible link between perception and action. Now, the nature of the action is very important here. It is goal-directed action. That is, action with whose every feature makes sense only when considered in light of a particular goal, such as picking up a peanut. Several other such goal-directed actions have been discovered since, including not only peanut grabbing, paper ripping, for example, breaking sounds. It has been found in the paper ripping case that neurons, an individual neuron has been found in a particular monkey, which was active when the monkey tore paper, but also when it heard the sound of someone else tearing paper. So this is not restricted to the visual modality. Now, this area of the brain they're recording from, ventral premotor cortex, is a very, very interesting area. And the homologous area in humans on the left-hand side is an area known as Broca's area, which is strongly associated with both speaking and fine manual movements. And from everything we've reviewed so far, you should be aware that speaking and fine manual movements together share many characteristics. They are highly controlled, learned, skilled, non-periodic movements. But In a rhesus macaque monkey, we of course don't identify a speech area. So these neurons were the subject of intense investigation. By some estimates, 10% of the neurons in that area would have this property of being particularly active both when the monkey does a particular goal-directed action and when it perceives someone else doing that goal-directed action. Do these exist in humans? The orthodox answer to that is yes, very, very widely distributed in humans. But I want you to notice how these neurons have been defined. They have no morphological characteristics that distinguish them from other neurons in the area. So there's nothing on their shape, form, anatomy that can pick them out. They have been identified functionally. That means that the entire understanding of the scientists as framing this as a motor area is necessary in order for this to appear as a distinguished type of neuron. Now, there's been an awful lot of elaboration from this, including the somewhat reckless proposal of a mirror neuron system. This system has never, to my mind, adequately been identified. But the fact that this neuron seemed to be agnostic about who was doing the action was of intense interest to these researchers. To some, it suggested a neural basis for understanding the intentions of others, as in mind reading. And I'll refer you back to the theory of mind and the simulation theory, which we met in social cognition. The goal is very important. So neurons have been found again in monkeys that fired strongly for grasp to eat, but not for grasp to place in a cup. So the same hand action with a different goal. To those who were extremely excited by these, they seemed to bridge a gap between perception and meaning, which has loomed large as a blind spot in our understanding of the brain. But others went further, and it was suggested that a mirror system could provide a neural account of empathy. Some very influential scientists there have proposed this. Work on humans in this area has all been done using fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, which we just met, and not on direct observation of mirror neurons. So in discussion of these hypothetical entities, it's worth paying attention to the manner in which specific studies are conducted and what the evidentiary basis is. The prominent cognitive neuroscientist Ramachandran argued that a mirror system could form the basis for self-awareness. So as he suggested, these neurons could not only help to simulate other people's behavior as in simulation theory, but could be turned inward to create, as he called it, second-order representations or meta-representations of your own earlier brain processes. And he developed an elaborate story in which this is the neural basis for introspection or self-awareness. And you can see these claims are getting rather large. The fact that this area is homologous to an area crucially involved in speech in humans led Rizzolatti and Michael Arbib to suggest that mirror neurons could provide a foundation for the development of language. We also met the imitation of face gestures in early infants and even in young chimpanzees. And these abilities by very young creatures with no knowledge of their own face, it was suggested should be based in the mirror system. So there's, on the basis of neurons which have no morphological definition, which have been functionally defined, a great deal of work has come together, very speculative work, seeking to close some gaps in our understanding. So these mirror neurons have been invoked for, what did we have? Intention, meaning, empathy, self-understanding, language, imitation, and the list goes on. Our enjoyment for sports goes in there somewhere as well. There has been something of a strong critical backlash against this work in recent years. The claim that there is a mirror system is really lacking much in the way of strong empirical evidence. We've met the difficulty that we encounter in social cognition, and For some of us, this invocation of mirroring properties explains nothing at all, whereas for others, it seems to provide a very important missing part of a story in which perception and action can be meaningfully linked together. Even those who are strongly on board with many of the theoretical commitments of the scientists involved in this work have been quite critical. The Myth of Mirror Neurons by Greg Hickok made the bestseller list in the New York Times, even though he's strongly in the representational information processing camps. And this proclivity to take complex evidence from complex studies and interpret it in terms of major philosophical concerns like empathy, self-understanding, and so on. This is something that we encounter all the time in cognitive neuroscience. And if you Google image search for the brain, some sample images are shown there. You'll notice that they bear no resemblance to brains. We frequently find these glowing, transcendent blue things that reach out into the universe emitting sparks. There's clearly an awful lot of projection going on here. And this is the danger that I've been at pains to suggest, which is we approach the brain in a great deal of ignorance. And we are always tempted to overinterpret what is a very, very mysterious, meaty object. Mirror neurons made great waves, and we're going to turn in the next video to a different kind of neuron, which is much less well known.